What's up, squad? It's Brandon from the Bantu Sun. Thank you so much for joining me today. I wanted to hop on quickly because I saw a couple things in the news that it really got the blood pumping and really interesting things that's going on right now in East Asia. And this is going to revolve around two countries, three, however you want to count it, that had a very tumultuous relationship with the US, and that is Korea and Vietnam. Korea now being North Korea and South Korea. And it seems as though these countries have, although a similar issue with America being involved in the Korean War and the Vietnam War, and because of the tight timeline and tight region, the proximity of these countries, they kind of get lumped together, but they're two distinct stories. Korea settled on what we would call a ceasefire or armistice, not necessarily a cessation of war, but you have the North side and the South Korean side, still kind of in a. It's not a hot war. I don't want to say cold war, but by definition, possibly. But kind of like there's this standstill where there's still hostility between the North and the South, but not necessarily bullets flying over the border yet. But as you constantly see, North Korea is constantly trying to assert its capabilities and how it can inflict pain if need be. And South Korea is highly ambitious, have been going up and up on the chain on the technology end, on the defense end, etc., with a great weapons deal, and recently in Poland. So one of the few countries outside of the West that's really big into the arms industry on a global level. Now, Vietnam, on the other hand, the U.S. left Vietnam, and Vietnam, the communists took over. They basically won out in the war as opposed to splitting up the country, and they unified under the communist rule. Now, Vietnam has kind of languished a little bit on the sidelines as they work their way through communist rule. As you know, communism isn't the most conducive economic system for global engagement in trade and growth of commerce. So they kind of been in the background. So when China made its switch under the management or leadership of Deng Xiaoping, when China kind of opened up and embraced the world more, especially the U.S., became the manufacturing hub of the U.S., Vietnam was kind of left in the dust. Now, with China going up and up the chain and really wanting to assert its dominance in recent time and establish itself in the world order, the U.S. has been relatively wary of this and has since developed a strategy of trying to, for lack of better phrasing, contain China. So the two things that really stuck out to me was recently is Vladimir Putin meeting up with the North Korean leader Kim Jong Un, and they're talking about they're going to have North Korea export weapons to Russia. And one, that's a no-no in the UN, but it kind of spits in the face of modern day logic because it's Russia is really basically saying they're going to go out of the standard system. They're still going to operate, and they're going to really develop this relationship. I always say Russia was caught flat-footed by the West because Russia should have already developed these relationships in East Asia, and I always think Russia was very European-minded. On the other hand, the West was very aggressive in trying to pull Ukraine from up under Russia in a very tight time frame. So starting with the Crimean War, or presenting itself during the Crimean War in Ukraine in 2014. Now, the other tip of news is Biden going to Hanoi, meeting with Vietnam, and them being the U.S. just being upgraded in a top tier diplomatic status of a comprehensive strategic partner to Vietnam. This is a big one to me as well. I always saw Vietnam as a very independent minded nation because they sent the U.S. out and they were able to take over the country. I always knew they probably have like let's say they were very confident in their ability to basically run their country, probably like Afghanistan is right now. And Vietnam really probably didn't think they needed the U.S. But you have this amazing opportunity. I don't think Vietnam had a soul changing moment, but they're kind of being pulled into opportunity right now as the U.S. is looking for alternatives to China. And it's hard to substitute a country with 1.4 billion people. Now, Vietnam has a lot of people, 100 million people, but that's far from the size of China. But it does have similar proximity and a better cost advantage at this point in the game. So, U.S. investment would do great things for Vietnam, given the culture of the work ethic and their ability to possibly manufacture. In fact, because of the population and the limited geographic scope, Western capital investment can probably dramatically change Vietnam in a very short amount of time. So those two scenarios is one with the Korean situation. I you know when I the West was so quick to isolate Russia, and I really start to think the U.S. and Russia take up the same space. And when I say that, I mean as far as industry and resources and technology, I think the U.S. sees Russia as a competitor, and because of that, I think the U.S. tries to limit Russia's ability to engage the war. This has that had come out during the Cold War when there were different worlds, first world, second world, third world, the West being first, the second is being considered the communist world, and then of course the third world is considered development. And these notions kind of fell by the wayside after the fall of the Soviet Union in the late 1980s, early 1990s. But the functionality of these designations probably did not fall by the wayside. And what the West probably saw with a rise in Russia as Russia started to recover politically and economically in the late 90s and early 2000s, Russia was able to solve a lot of problems for energy poor countries, especially in this region, primarily Europe. And I think that the US saw this as a competitor, and not only being a competitor, but basically saying, it's better when they weren't around. Possibly. I don't know. I was not in the room. But it's very odd that the West was so quick to kind of ostracize Russia and keep them on the outs. And I'm really thinking, does this have anything to do with they don't want Russia in the current world order or have access to high developed nations at all. And the U.S. wants to take that role as the key resource core that's binding these countries because Russia can export what U.S. can export. Russia has copper, Russia has oil, Russia has iron ore, Russia has wheat. A lot of the things in the U.S. Russia can probably get their hands on. Now, that being said, um, will this world go from what would possibly be a world order led by the West to a old new Cold War status where they have these two different groupings where America has its allies that's dependent on that, and possibly Russia and China, if this tension with U.S. and China continue, have their allies that are loyal to them. So this is something I'm watching out in the news. Let me know your thoughts. Comment below. Like, share, subscribe. If you enjoy the content, until next time, take care. Bantu up.